This past January, France saw 2 terror attacks in Paris that shook the country to its core. The attack on the Charlie Hebdo satirical newspaper and later the deadly hostage-taking at the kosher supermarket in Vincennes. With the trauma still fresh, I-24 News correspondent Julien Bahloul returned to the hyper-kosher and brings us the story.
January 9th, 2015. 12 minutes past 5 in the afternoon. French police launch an assault on the hyper-kosher supermarket to free hostages being held by militant Islamist Hamedi Koulibaly, who had killed 4 people. 6 months have gone by. The supermarket has reopened its doors, but under heavy protection. The employees, too choked to come back to work, have been replaced by new ones.
I think about it every morning. When I get here, I remember the images of the police opening the doors and everybody running out. I still have these images in my head.
Pedro, the manager of the supermarket, agreed to show us where it all happened. This is the cellar in which some of the hostages found refuge.
They went downstairs and hid there, mostly in the cold room.
This is the cold room. 5 people and a baby hid there for hours. Others were forced to go back upstairs after Koulibaly had threatened to kill more hostages. Lassana Batili, at the time employed by the supermarket, was in the cellar when the first gunshots were fired. He cut the electricity to give those hidden in the cold room a chance of surviving, and suggested the others follow him and escape up the goods elevator. The hostages, judging the alternative too risky, preferred to stay hidden. In spite of everything, Lassana managed to escape.
When we came out of the hospital, I took a taxi and went back home on my own. No one can forget. We try, but we can't. In time, little by little, we'll make more efforts to forget. I have nightmares often. I think I'm going to try to forget in time, but it's hard.
Lassana is French now, and his official papers were handed to him by the French Prime Minister himself. He wants to look ahead.
I'm taking French classes. I've started a training course at the Parisian City Hall to become a childcare worker.
The hyper-kosher supermarket is also looking towards the future. Nothing, though, will completely erase the traces of that day, neither on the walls nor in people's minds.
And joining me right now here in the studio is correspondent for I-24 News, French Julien Bahloul. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. Julien, you know, it's amazing because we had a conversation just before we entered the studio, and you told me that you basically grew up in the same neighborhood, in the same area that Koulibaly was growing up in. And how come he turned out to be the way that he turned out to be, and you turned out to be a journalist here in I-24 News?
We grew up a few kilometers away from each other. Actually, I just discovered this afternoon that he grew up in the building of where my grandmother used to live, which means that I probably saw him a lot of time when I was a child. We cannot say that there is one reason to explain, of course, the situation, but I think that we can say at least 3 reasons. First of all, after the Second World War, there was a huge wave of immigration from the French colonies to France. And the French government at this time decided to put all of these people in the same cities. And today you can see in the same cities a lot of criminality and unemployment. But what we have to say that today the criminals are not immigrants, they are the children or the grandchildren of the immigrants, because the immigrants were not criminals. The immigrants were working, were looking for a new life. So it's crazy to see that today the criminals are the grandchildren of people who moved to France, and that people grew up in France, grew up with French values in French schools.
How do you explain this, Julien? How do you explain this? Because we've been talking a lot about the failure of France.
And it's a big failure.
It's a big failure of France, the way that it's treating its immigration community, the way that it's treating its minorities, the situation in the suburbs, like you're saying. And it seems that 6 months after, nothing is actually changing in France.
nothing is changing for already 10 or 20 years, of course not for the last 6 months. First of all, when you grow up in this kind of neighborhood with a lot of unemployment, with a lot of violence, it doesn't encourage you to become a better man. This is the first thing. The second thing, we know that politics are responsible for that. First of all, because they did not invest in those neighborhoods, but also because we know that mayors from the far left and some teachers decided not to see the problem, decided to forget everything, to buy the silence and to buy like kind of peace in the city. But it's not the only reason. I have to say that France failed with something else. France failed to do with the Muslim community what they did with the Jewish community. When Napoleon created the French Judaism, there was a kind of agreement between the rabbis and Napoleon that you will be full French and you will be committed to France. Okay? Today you have to know that imams in France, that imams in France are not trained in France. They are trained abroad, and it's an open door to
terrorism from outside inside. Julien Bahloul, thank you very, very much. It would have been amazing to ask you next time what would have happened if you wouldn't have grown up in this kind of neighborhood, if you would have stayed there or not. But for now, Julien Bahloul, thank you very much for this.